So the following clip from the World Government Summit has been doing the rounds on social media. This video was actually posted on their Twitter account back on the 30th of March, but it's worth checking out.
There's no longer any doubt that humans are heating up the oceans, land and sea by burning fossil fuels.
Bullshit, as we know, but let's carry on.
The world has to overcome not only the damage done to our economies and our societies by COVID-19, it also has to confront the repercussions.
So the video mentions distance learning and the jabs, and then it gets to my favorite part. There it is, the New World Order. I thought that was just a conspiracy theory though. Conspiracy theories being spoiler alerts that come true if you just give them enough time.
I see a future where the internet is available for free for everyone, and that means the location of power is going to shift. Decentralization of power structures everywhere may be the beginning of that shift in finance, in political power.
We have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation.
As you may or may not know, I've already covered the World Government Summit that took place on the 29th and 30th of this year. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from that video.
The New World Order is just a crazy conspiracy theory. You're just a tinfoil hat nut job for talking about it.
Okay, so I guess we can just ignore the World Government Summit that took place in Dubai between March 29th and 30th of this year, which can be watched on YouTube. The video is almost 7 hours long, and it began with the following.
Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning on what is the first official day of World Government Summit here at Dubai Expo 2020. And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
Yeah, the New World Order. Anyway, the website description for the World Government Summit is as follows. The World Government Summit 2022 will be held exceptionally in tandem with the closing of Expo 2020 Dubai that brings the world together under the theme Shaping Future Governments. The summit will bring thought leaders, global experts and decision makers from around the globe to share and contribute to the development of tools, policies and models that are essential in shaping future governments. The themes are building cities of the future. In a rapidly urbanizing world, 70% of the world population will live in cities by 2050. What a coincidence that this just seems to align with the ambitions of Agenda 21. The way cities are designed and operate will define the path to sustainability based on decisions made towards smart infrastructure, transportation systems, energy and production and consumption, waste management, and citizens' engagement as partners in driving change. In other words, smart cities. We've talked about them before. You know the drill. The pod life, basically. Action sustainability for positive impact. The impact of climate change is increasingly visible and devastating. Youth are lobbying for change, yet progress on curbing global emissions have reached a standstill. Yeah, youth are lobbying. Are you sure those lobby groups of young people are not in fact astroturfed movements that are presented as being grassroots, but are in fact designed to serve the interests of the globalists? Just thinking out loud there. Successful climate action is needed that builds scalable partnerships and incentivizes the advancement and adoption of renewable energy, new technologies, and most importantly, social responsibility to win the race to net zero for humanity. As I've said before, net zero carbon emissions can only be achieved if there's a lot less people on the planet. You know? Empowering societal resilience. The fraying of social fabric is increasingly exacerbated by inequality, the spread of fake news on digital platforms, as well as the rise of populism, intolerance, and extremism. It's been my experience doing this job for several years now that ideas like fake news, populism, intolerance, and things that are labeled extremism are usually just genuine forms of dissent against political correctness, global homo, for example, authoritarianism, globalism in general. Governments must lead the way with better regulation and foster global dialogue on human values, That's not the role of government. Identity, faith, definitely not the role of government at all. Unless, I guess, we're going to have a one world religion or something. Culture, arts, sports, and peace. Yeah, that's not disturbing or anything. Sounds like a world in which all aspects of our lives are regulated and tightly ordered by our governments. Enabling the future of education and work. The acceleration of digital transformation has enabled a new normal, haven't heard that phrase in months now, for education and work that transcends geography and allows for greater flexibility. As the world changes, so will the skills that are needed in the future workforce. Lifelong learning, upskilling, and reskilling will become the new norm as generational divides are bridged and globally, the digital divide. The photo for this one is 4 people sitting down with VR headsets on. It's like Ready Player One pod life. That's great. I'd like to just go into cryostasis for a few centuries. Wake me up when things are, they've come full circle and it's, say, the 1950s again. That'd be nice. The other themes are about accelerating global economic recovery, policies that drive progress, and government development and designing the future of healthcare systems. So basically it's the transforming of global economics, healthcare, and government, and I suspect not in ways that we as free and sovereign citizens would be all that thrilled about. You get the idea. Let's play some of the video.
Because I believe what is clear is that we have hit an inflection point. We are certainly living in a unique age of uncertainty and volatility in global affairs.
A volatility by design, I would add.
Whether you are from the global north or the global south, we have all collectively lived through the twilight zone that was the pandemic and the changes to our social, our digital, and our fiscal landscape that COVID-19 wrought. And just as the world re-emerges from the pandemic, we are faced with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which certainly feels like a transformative geopolitical moment.
Yeah, I know. It's like one Hegelian crisis after another. A problem that generates a reaction, and thus a solution is offered to the people as our world is radically transformed. It's also tiresome.
Coming as that does, against a backdrop of great power struggles, the emergence of middle powers, of climate crisis, and cybersecurity challenges, the trend lines certainly seem to indicate a world headed in a disorderly direction.
And this is the crux of it, really. The order out of chaos strategy. Create a world too disordered, chaotic, and filled with uncertainty for people to deal with, in which their very way of life is disrupted and their standard of living is threatened or diminished somewhat by making old systems unworkable so that the people will scream for their governments to do something to save them. Once the population has been brought to its knees, they will basically accept any dystopian totalitarian system so long as it's better than chaos. We've arrived at this point in history where these Hegelian strategies can work only because our globalist-controlled governments have surrendered our sovereignty and made our countries dependent upon international supply chains and international cooperation and regulation, as opposed to fostering genuine self-sufficiency and economic independence.
Is the US-led multilateral system created post-World War II to manage international relations so that the world would never again see and experience the same chaos and disorder of a world war? Is it anything like fit for purpose? And if not, what is the alternative?
I believe these kinds of events, similar to the World Economic Forum ones at Davos, are really about shaping public discourse and framing opinion. Events like this are really where mainstream media narratives seem to be developed. So let's skip ahead to a couple of noteworthy portions of this panel. I'm going to play a clip here of Frederick Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council.
So my mentor on issues of world order is Henry Kissinger, so I'll try to channel him, and forgive me, Dr. Kissinger.
Just as a quick aside, Henry Kissinger was a teacher to Klaus Schwab, and Klaus Schwab said as much in 2016 at an event at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.
Thank you very much, Professor Guo. It's a great pleasure to be here because first I recognize in the audience some familiar faces, and second, it's a pleasure to be at the school which is named after one of the people who impressed me most in my life. Actually, I have met practically every leader in the last 40 years. And there were only 3 or 4 leaders who really made a lasting impression on me and to a certain extent changed my thinking. And one of those was Mandela, another one was my teacher at Harvard 50 years ago, Professor Henry Kissinger.
But his answer would be, what do you mean no new world order? We have not had a world order yet. What we've had a Western order that was imposed on the world. And so the first world order in modern times, or somewhat modern times, was 4 centuries ago with the Treaty of Westphalia, ending a century of conflict, the 30 Years' War. And it wasn't a great moral thrust, it was just recognizing the world as it was. If you look at what we're trying to create right now, we're, I would say, at an inflection point in history, as important as the end of World War I, where we got the effort at world order tragically wrong. We ended up with millions of dead, the Holocaust, in World War II. After World War II, we got it more right than wrong with the creation of the International Liberal Order and the United Nations and the Bretton Woods system and the European Coal and Steel Community, NATO, etc. And then the Soviet Union fell. And then the Cold War, we thought it was the end of history, and we thought that everyone could fit into this system that had been created, and it worked for a while, but not everybody came into it.
By the way, just an FYI, whatever the new system is, I'm personally opting out of it now, okay? I think there might be a few corners of, say, Alaska, still remote enough for me to go off-grid in a log cabin in the woods.
But China grew. China certainly took full advantage of being part of the global system. Russia did not. Russia became more of an outlier. And I think where we are now, and this gets to your question, Becky, of a new world order, is it can go in 2 directions with the war in Ukraine now being a decisive element. Either the jungle is back, as the historian Bob Kagan talks, and that we can go into a darker era, or we could go into an era, because of the advances of science, advances of technology, that could be one of the most prosperous, promising, progressive, enlightened, moderate, modern eras that we've ever faced.
Colour me skeptical, but I doubt such a technological utopia could be birthed from the current dystopia we're living through, where our governments have the ability, at a moment's notice, to enact unprecedented control over our lives, where big tech can openly and aggressively and comprehensively censor free speech in ways that would shock even Stalin, and a media that can blatantly lie to the public day after day with the most sophisticated brainwashing propaganda techniques ever developed. Good outcomes don't generally emerge from such horrendous starting points. I'm going to play a clip now of Dr. Pippa Malmgren. She's an economist and former US presidential advisor.
I remember talking to an Australian diplomat at one point about this break between the US and China, and said, you know, both sides are going to say, whose team are you on? And he said, our job is to make sure the question never arises. But the question has arisen. And so I think we have to go deeper. And it's not about the US versus China. It's about what underpins a world order is always the financial system. I was very privileged. My father was an advisor to Nixon when they came off the gold standard in '71. And so I was brought up with a kind of inside view of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one.
Which, in my opinion, is why we've had on and off lockdowns for the past 2 years. Because the financial system was collapsing and hyperinflation was on the way for a while, but the globalists needed a justification to accomplish multiple goals at once. Not just the mass injecting of a huge portion of the population, but a series of useful crises that could justify an economic transformation. They needed a cover story for the hyperinflation that had been long on the way since our financial system was placed on life support after the 2008 crash. Lockdowns reduced spending and helped to control the velocity of money in the economy. The Ukraine-Russia narrative helps to exacerbate this situation further, and from food shortages, supply chain breakdowns, and rising prices for oil and food, it's possible to trick the public into believing that these things have an authentic source. Once our currencies are worthless and the world is sufficiently chaotic and unstable, people will beg for whatever prepared solution their governments offer them. The Great Reset and a new, tightly controlled world of digital programmable money will likely be that solution.
And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money.
I wouldn't hold my breath that any such Bill of Rights would be all that beneficial, to be honest, considering the current constitutions and bills of rights type documents that we have in this world didn't protect our people from the authoritarian overreach of our governments as they forcibly took every one of our rights during the fake pandemic of the past 2 years. But of course, the idea of a record of every single transaction that happens in the economy is quite terrifying. Of course, morons will reply with, "But if you have got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear," except you won't be the one deciding if you've got something to hide and if you've done something wrong. With no cash, you have no freedom. You can't engage in private transactions with another person because the state can see absolutely everything you're doing. You can't do so much as a cash-in-hand type of manual labor nixer, for example. You won't be able to give your kids some cash in a birthday card or give your grandkids some cash or a few coins like you used to do. That'll all be gone, and programmable money will be basically like vouchers, which can be activated and deactivated when the bank or the government see fit, and they can expire over time as well. So you'll only be able to spend this programmable money on the items that they authorize you to, and only for the period of time that they allow. They can also skim a transaction fee off the top whenever they want. They can add automatic carbon levies and other taxes, for example, and they could block your money if you've been found guilty of wrongthink, for example. So this could be the ultimate way of controlling political dissent. It's sort of like having your PayPal account closed. They will have complete control. Anyway, Klaus Schwab spoke at the conference remotely, and he said the following.
We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected.
Well, at least they're telling us what's coming, and what we've been predicting for the past 2 years. It seems like it's unfortunately going to come to pass.
In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever. What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future.
You know, it sure is amazing that all the major geopolitical events that transpire in our world seem to always lead to the idea of a one-world government. Because, as we're often told, global crises require global solutions. Take the digital ID, for example. Every single major narrative that dominates this moment in history is leading us to the same end goal. That's quite a coincidence. The introduction of a digital ID. That's where apparently we're going. Yet we're supposed to believe that none of these events are connected. So a global pandemic requires everyone's vax status to be recorded through a digital ID system. Climate change requires the introduction of a digital ID to record everyone's carbon score, for example. We're told internet anonymity must end because of all sorts of things, like hate online, or fake news, or cyber attacks, whatever. So everyone has to log into the internet with a digital ID. We're told the Russia-Ukraine war will result in food rationing via the digital ID. We're told that our money must become 100% digital, therefore requiring a digital ID. we're told that future refugees fleeing everything from war to climate change must have a digital ID. The justifications change, but the end point is the same. The digital ID, which is the end of all human freedom and total control over our lives and spending habits. It's also the linchpin of the Great Reset, and without it, the plans of the globalists would be derailed. So let's hope enough people reject the digital ID. I will leave it there, guys. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please share it far and wide, and if you'd like to support my work, you can do so via the links below, Subscribestar, and also my website, computingforever.com/donate. Catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.